Assalamualaikum and good afternoon, everyone. For this afternoon, I would like to share with you these three narrations. First is about Mayumi. Mayumi is a school teacher in a very ordinary, simple town where her family lived. And she managed to know someone, a boy, who was actually not her age, as well as not in par with her educational attainment. So they met each other, they get to know each other, and they fell in love. The relationship continued, and when the mother of Mayumi knew about it, the mother vehemently disagreed of the relationship, because knowing that her daughter is a school teacher, and the boy didn't even finish his secondary school. They had an intimate relationship, and after some time, Mayumi got pregnant. When Mayumi got pregnant, the mother was so enraged, and she said that she is not really approving the relationship of Mayumi and the guy. So therefore, this guy proposed for marriage, but Mayumi's mother vehemently disagreed. So she said to the people of the town, she said that I will do something to myself during Mayumi's wedding day. So Mayumi overheard it, and she got to know that her mother will do or will end her life during that very day. Thinking about it, Mayumi said, I could not take this situation if my mother will do something bad on herself during my wedding day. We didn't know what comes actually to the mind of Mayumi, that one morning she went to their farm, and at 4 o'clock in the morning, she took her life. She committed suicide by drinking a pesticide. That was the story of Mayumi. And before that, she left a letter. And she said in her letter that because I could not take that my mother will take her own life during my wedding day, then I will be the one to do it myself first. That was Mayumi's last letter, telling as well to her boyfriend that she loved her very much. The next is about Mr. F's blessedness. Why is this blessedness? Because Mr. F's career move was actually so much delightful in a sense that it goes from a very positive movement from one next to the next career. He was formerly in Malaysia, and then after some time he was given an offer job in Oman. And just for about 1 year and a half in Oman, he got an offer again to Hawaii. And currently he is in Hawaii. So that feeling of things coming on to his life, of having this happiness as well as pleasantness of his career from one next to the next. The last one is Rosemary. Rosemary is a young child, 11 years old, and she is living with her mother. Along the time, she is in school, and one day, her art teacher, appreciated her work. And her teacher said, you have such a very good art. And she got a pat on the shoulder. And Rosemary cried. So the teacher said, what actually happened to you? She said, because you gave appreciation to what I have done, but for all these years I've been living with my mother, she never appreciated all that I have done. So it was tears of joy, could be tears of sadness and disappointments, because she has never ever received any appreciation from her mother. These are the three narrations. Well, Ladies and gentlemen, our topic for this afternoon is Minding Emotions, the Inclusive Approach to Mental Health. I am Daisy Jane Orculio. I finished my PhD at the International Islamic University, Malaysia. Our learning objectives are the following: to define emotions, to understand the different theories of emotions, to analyze the physiological, cognitive, and behavioral responses of emotions, to evaluate how mindfulness towards emotions, quote unquote, relates to mental health. What is emotion and what are the three components of emotion? Emotion is a feeling state characterized by physiological arousal, expressive behaviors, and cognitive interpretation. Let us in detail explain these three components of emotion. First, we go to the detail of physiological component. Every emotion produces different physiological responses within the body, which can include distinct changes as well as patterns of brain activation, neurotransmitter production, as well as autonomic nervous system activity. For example, you are all alone here in the classroom and you are doing your own business alone, and then suddenly a group of your friends came with all the balloons, with all the cakes, and then giving you such a big surprise. With you just sitting alone, by looking at the stimulus of these friends that coming over, there will be an incident, you will be surprised. So there is that physiological responses to the stimulus. Your heart rate may increase because it's the result that you are being startled. Your muscles can be temporarily tensed, as well as your skin temperature may increase as well. These are the physiological component of a stimulus. Therefore, looking into the cognitive appraisal, you will at the same time is going to think, what is this all about? And this cognitive appraisal or reactions of our body, it differs from individual to the individual based from our experiences as well as our culture. So the cognitive reactions now is the mental possessment that includes appraisals of what is happening around you, as well as the expectations about the situation, as well as the general thought about the experience. So again, go back to the example. What was happening, your mind will be activated, your brain will be activated, trying to understand and to perceive what was the situation is all about. But remember that cognitive appraisals or cognitive understanding of the situation can be positive and negative. Probably because you are not so pleased of any surprise parties because of your past experience. So therefore, the situation may dread you along or makes you happy. So therefore, that is the meaning why cognitive processes that is going on within us, but it is very subjective. It depends on the individual as well as the experience of the individual as well as the culture of the individual. Now, moving to the expressive behavior or the behavioral responses. In other words, each emotion, remember that each emotion brings different behavioral responses. So behavioral responses or expressive behavior can be your facial expressions, you are surprised, your eyes become big, as well as bodily reactions. And it can be again interpreted differently culture to culture. So for instance, in the example that your friends came along with a surprise party, you may clap your hands, you may smile, and then you may go nearer to your friends. with the feeling that you are happy. And these are all interrelated when we have that emotions in the particular time. I hope that is clear. But moving on, there are different theories of emotions. Let us explain first about the James Lange theory of emotion. For James Lange theory, emotion arises from physiological arousal. That is what he explained and he advocated. There is a perceived event, then there is the physiological and behavioral responses, then you have the emotional experience. For example, you saw a snake. Of course, when we see a snake, what will you do? You will be so tense and you wanted to run away. There is that feeling. So for James Lange theory, from the perceived event, you have that physiological arousal first, and then the behavioral responses, then the emotional experience. Over here, he said, your happiness comes from smiling. Therefore, smiling first because you are happy. Or the person is crying, which is the physiological arousal or the physiological reaction, then because you are sad. That is the James Lange theory. However, there is another different theory, still under the physiological component of Cannon-Bard theory of emotion. For Cannon-Bard theory, for him, emotion originates in the thalamus. The thalamus is part of our brain, wherein it has the physiological systems. The body is the physiological systems, and the mind is the emotional experience. These, according to Cannon-Bard theory, are actually independently activated at the same time. Remember that for Cannon-Bard theory, the body, the physiological system, and the mind, which is inside our brain, or the emotional experience, are independently activated at the same time. Of course, they activated separately, independently, but at the same time. So for Cannon-Bard theory, the perceived event, then the physiological and behavioral responses, then the emotional experience. So for example, when the snake example, when we see the snake, for Cannon-Bard theory, your physiological systems, your heart rate increases, as well as your feeling of your whatever reactions that goes on in your body, as well as what is the interpretation of the mind. These two acts independently, but at the same time, then you have the emotional experience. Talking about the autonomic nervous system, we know that we have the sympathetic functions as the fight or flight, and the parasympathetic function as the restore calm. When we see a snake, when we see a monkey, over here in our place there are so many monkeys, and we have the tendency to be afraid of the monkeys that surround us. When we try to run away, or if we try to do something to protect ourselves, it is the work of the sympathetic nervous system, wherein over here our pupil dilates, we inhibit salivation because we see something very delicious. It increases our respiration, accelerates heartbeat, stimulus glucose release, secretes adrenaline as well as non-adrenaline, inhibits digestion, and over in the parasympathetic is the one that which after our fight or flight reaction, we are restored to be calm. Our body is back to calmness. Therefore, over here, there will be slowing of the respiration, the slowing of the heartbeat, which is the work of the parasympathetic nervous system. Universally, there are six emotions that are recognized universally. These are recognized because it has, according to research and study, it has a consistent facial expression. Therefore, happiness, sadness, surprise, anger, fear, and disgust are very common universally. Culture to culture has the same facial expression of these 6 different emotions. There is another theory of emotion, which is Schachter 2-factor theory of emotion. For him, he said, there is that physiological arousal when we see the stimulus. The physiological arousal are the sweaty palms, the increased heart rate, the rapid heart breathing, as well as our cognitive label is activated. The cognitive label attributes source of arousal to a cause, as well as to have an emotion. Both factors are required. So therefore, when we have all these different types of emotions, we need this physiological arousal as well as the cognitive label. Therefore, the person will have that certain type of emotional experience. The problem nowadays is that we are so much concerned of the emotions that we know, because we have discussed that some emotions are very obviously can be detected, but there are also many emotions that could hardly be detected. Remember that in a similar time, in a similar situation, we all differ in our reactions. And there are times as well in our lives that in a situation, we have several reactions or emotions. But there is this word or this term, aporetic emotions, which is called or which is defined as something that we could hardly know. It is vague as well as lack of sharp specificity. There are times in our lives that we don't know exactly what is this that we are feeling. Therefore, aporetic emotions is manifest themselves when we know we feel something but we are not sure what it is. And the effort to fathom those feelings seems directionless or blocked. Aporetic literally means or not, and poreia crossable connote the difficulty of acquiring knowledge, not necessarily its impossibility. Therefore, there is a challenge to call for everyone to identify emotions to be able to enjoy mental health. True enough that there were times in our life that we had the difficulty of identifying emotions. And you know that if it is pervasive, meaning if it is continuous, if it is in a prolonged time that a person could hardly detect or could not identify what is his feeling, that is called alexithymia. Alexithymia is a personality construct characterized by subclinical inability to identify and describe emotions in the self. One of the core characteristics of alexithymia is the dysfunction in emotional awareness. Linking emotions and psychotherapy, clients usually come to psychotherapists for these people to allow these professionally trained individuals to help them solve the problem. So therefore, these clients come to therapy all the time knowing that they feel something but not really exactly sure what it is. A person can have 2 or more emotions, as I have said a while ago, at the same time in one setting or emotions. Therefore, the initial step of the psychotherapy or the psychotherapist or a counselor is to help the client specifying the clearest type of emotion he or she is feeling. And if that initial step is not being met, is not achieved, then the helping process is actually futile or useless. May I ask you, have you ever visited the counseling office of UUM? Have you visited the office? Or you did not? You have not, since semester 1. Why is it so? Anyway, for the first few or maybe 10 minutes ago, we had discussed this, and I would like to bring out the key points that I have discussed a while ago. Remember that our emotional states are combinations of physiological arousal, psychological appraisal, and cognitive processes, subjective to experiences and expressive behavior. Our psychological appraisal of a situation is informed by our experiences, background, as well as culture. Different people may have different emotional experiences of similar situations. The field of psychology examines emotions from a scientific perspective by looking at their mental, physiological, as well as behavioral components. Anyhow, may I tell you that because of our life now is so busy, we are no longer sensitive to what is currently our emotion. To identify your emotion is very important for emotional health as well as mental health. We have here, human beings are sensitive. They go through life so quickly that they often don't stop to ponder what they are feeling. And that's one habit that needs to be broken. Amidst your busyness, find time to isolate yourselves and think and reflect of what is that emotion that you're currently feeling. And from there, you can make some analysis of what is the thing or feeling that is dominant in your current situation. May I share with you these words of wisdom? Never apologize for being sensitive or emotional. It's a sign that you have a big heart and that you aren't afraid to let others see it. Showing your emotions is a sign of strength. Anyhow, let us have these tutorial lessons. This is the boiling frog syndrome. You may open your smartphones and go to the boiling frog syndrome. It is a fable of a frog who was placed in a pot, but the water was still cold, and then suddenly it became hotter. And because if you will place the frog suddenly in a hot water, of course he will jump. Therefore, I have these questions. Do you think the frog experienced the feeling of aporetic emotion while placed in the pot? What activates emotions? What's the most important function of emotion? Describe the function of the sympathetic nervous system, arousal of emotion. How important knowing one's emotional state to mental health? And the sixth is, what is another question we should pose for discussion? Thank you.